I'm Grant Walker. Welcome to Last Call for Wednesday the 17th of June, and I'll be back with Heads Up Thursday morning, 10 a.m. Let's go to Christchurch. Plans are afoot to restore some of Christchurch's icons damaged by the earthquakes, but not the Anglican Cathedral in the centre of Cathedral Square. City councillors have voted to spend $127 million on restoring the town hall, much to the delight of its architect, Sir Miles Warren, and the irritation of Canterbury Earthquake Recovery Minister Jerry Brownlee. Mr Brownlee wanted the council to abandon the town hall in favour of new buildings closer to the Isaac Theatre Royal in the next block, as proposed in the government's largely discredited rebuild blueprint styled by Sarah architect Don Miskell. The councillors were convinced by a staff presentation with engineers' reports. A Deloitte report endorsed the restoration. Insurance will cover $53 million of the cost. If full restoration took place, the cover would be $68 million. If nothing was done, the indemnity payout would be $32 million. The restoration will require extensive engineering to fix up lateral movement and the effects of liquefaction. Several options were considered: do nothing at an estimated cost of $12 million, build a new 1,500-seat auditorium and 600-seat theatre on a new site at a cost of $193.5 million plus site costs, repair the Town Hall auditorium and foyer only at an estimated cost of $91 million, repair the Town Hall auditorium, foyer and James Hay Theatre at an estimated cost of $109 million, or full repair and restoration to a target of 100% of new building standard at a cost of $127.5 million. Construction is due to begin this month with an anticipated completion date of June 2018. Another major civic asset under repair is the Art Gallery. It's scheduled to reopen at the end of this year or early next year. A base isolation building upgrade is being installed by a consortium comprising Fulton Hogan, Ruamoko Solutions, Warren and Marnie and Norman Disney and Young in a $20 million contract. The group is also carrying out $14 million worth of insurance repairs to the damaged interior. Meanwhile, plans have been revealed for a $45 million restoration of Christchurch's Catholic Cathedral in Barbados Street. Unlike the Anglican Cathedral in the square, the Catholic Cathedral has largely escaped the same raging controversy over repair, restoration or partial demolition and rebuild. The Catholic Bishop of Christchurch has revealed a $45 million plan to restore the Cathedral of the Blessed Sacrament, which looks like a ruin after the February 22nd, 2011 earthquake. Bishop Barry Jones says attempts will be made to save the main body of the cathedral and a new entrance will be constructed. The front of the building will be demolished. Further engineering studies will reveal if the nave is too badly damaged to be saved or the ground conditions unsuitable, which might require full demolition. The rebuilt cathedral will include deconstructed parts of the former but will not replicate the original one. The Catholic Cathedral was completed in 1905 and is a Category 1 heritage building. To our cost of living, a weakening of the New Zealand dollar has pushed Auckland and Wellington down in a world cost of living survey for expats. Mercer's 21st annual cost of living survey, which benchmarks more than 200 world cities against New York and US dollars, highlights that currency movements can significantly impact the overall cost of doing business. It measures the comparative cost of more than 200 items in each location, including housing, transportation, food, clothing, household goods and entertainment. Auckland, 61, dropped 3 places, while Wellington, 83, fell 4. The fall in the Australian dollar pushed Sydney, 31, down 5, and Melbourne, 47, down 14. Perth, 48, dropped 11 places, while Canberra, 65, fell 12, and Brisbane fell 13. Adelaide was the cheapest and fell 12 places. Asian and European cities, particularly Hong Kong, number 2, and Zurich 3, Singapore 4, and Geneva 5, top the list of most expensive cities. The costliest city for the third consecutive year is Luanda, the capital of Angola. Despite being recognised as a relatively inexpensive city, the cost of imported goods and safe living conditions are available at a steep price.
This is NBR Radio on Wednesday, June 17th. I'm Owen Poland, and I'm joined in the studio by reporter Jamie Ball, who's got an update on the Serious Fraud Office investigation involving Zespri, which seems to be costing Zespri an arm and a leg, Jamie.
Yeah, it does appear to be. When we last covered this, roughly a year ago, it was coming in at around the 3 million mark. We're now up to 6.3 million, and that's allocated up for this financial year as well, for Zespri to effectively defend itself from the serious fraud investigation. So where the final tally will end up, we don't know.
Is it plausible, and your story alludes to this, that after almost 2 years of this investigation, Zespri would not know what the focus of the investigation actually is?
I think that's pretty difficult to accept that could be the case. I think what might be the case is, as is their right, is to keep it from the public and keep it from the growers, while they put plenty of effort into their public relations campaign and response in advance of the SFO ruling, whenever that may be. It seems remarkable that the SFO could be asking for that amount of information over that amount of time, and for Zespri to hand over $6 million to defend itself, and yet claim it doesn't understand what the focus of the investigation is. Well, if it doesn't understand that, what does it understand about the investigation?
Well, it sort of rings a bell in terms of previous SFO investigations under previous leadership of the SFO. I must say that these things seem to drag on. They're terribly complicated for one reason or another. So how long might this take? They're
complicated, and there's, of course, a good and justifiable aspects of secrecy attached to them, which need to be respected until the final rulings are made. So really, we can only go on what we're actually either told by Zespri or SFO, because there are only two parties involved. But as to how long it could drag on for, we do not know. And also what needs to be stressed is just because the SFO is investigating a company, it doesn't infer that the company is guilty of anything. SFO can investigate almost any large company. And it's up to us just to keep an open mind until the outcome of that ruling is made.
Now, Zespri's chief executive, Lane Jager, remains in office. Do you believe he is compromised at all in this?
Well, I think he could be in somewhat of a hypothetical corner, in the sense that he was CEO for some of the time while these... should I backtrack and say that it's widely believed that one of the main focuses of the investigation is the under-declaration of customs duty in Shanghai between 2008 and 2010. Now, Mr. Jager became the acting CEO in mid-2008, and then by the end of that year he was the CEO, and he has been since then. So if he was not across this at the time, if he was not aware of this double invoicing scheme, should we call it, going on, why wasn't he at the time? And if he wasn't, that puts him in a certain situation as to how aware he is of what's going on in the company. If he was, what did he do about it? Because he's still the current CEO. So I do wonder to what extent that will come out in the final ruling of the SFO.
Damned if he did and damned if he didn't, Jamie.
It appears to be.
That's NBR journalist Jamie Ball.
NBR Radio with Hotel de Brett, partying since 1959. www.hoteldebret.com. NBR Radio.
And now another report on Auckland housing. The Productivity Commission strongly recommends more interventionist approaches that will unlock land for large-scale developments to alleviate housing shortages and housing costs, which it says will not be solved by policies already in place. The Commission says in its draft report, Using Land for Housing, published today, the scale of shortage in some settings, and especially Auckland, and the complexities in land regulation indicate a need for bigger steps. Business as usual is clearly proving inadequate to deal with Auckland's housing shortfall. It recommends the removal of all local body building rules that exceed the requirements of the Building Act, and that council should scrap rules relating to balcony and open space for apartments, minimum apartment size, minimum parking requirements, and that they should be required to undertake robust, cost-efficient analysis before introducing building height limits. It also proposes the creation of a new National Urban Development Authority with compulsory land acquisition powers, which the Commission says may be necessary to assemble large enough tracts of land to allow housing developments to occur on a scale that would bring construction costs down and justify the necessary infrastructure investments that many city councils are reluctant to fund. The Commission says in the 358-page report, an urban development authority could play an important role at the nexus of a number of barriers to land supply identified. Public submissions are sought by August 4, ahead of a final report to be issued on September 30. While special housing areas are bringing new land for development to market, the Commission says most are not large enough to allow large-scale developments and do not by themselves encourage private sector development or infrastructure funding. The Commission recommends that more user-pays charges should be permitted to help fund infrastructure, and that the current ban on local bodies being able to levy road tolls should be abolished. In business news, Xero has overtaken German multinational SAP to become the largest vendor by revenue in New Zealand's enterprise resource planning or ERP software market, IDC says, or at least in the area of financial applications. Xero, which recently reported 500,000 customers worldwide, said it had revenue of $32.9 million from the New Zealand market in the year to March 31, 2015, a 25% year-on-year increase as Xero's New Zealand customer count rose from 102,000 to 138,000 over the 12 months. SAP's fully owned New Zealand subsidiary reported revenue of $121 million last year, up from the previous year's $118 million. ERP is usually seen as software used to run large organisations. Auckland Council is a key SAP customer. IDC's chart also saw MYOB overtake a close competitor Microsoft to claim the third highest share in the ERP category. Overall, IDC found the New Zealand software market grew 6.5% in 2014, close to its predicted 6.6% forecast. The market is set to grow by a 5-year compound annual growth rate of 6.5% to reach $1.791 billion in 2019. The ERP market was the major growth engine for the New Zealand software market in 2014, IDC says, mainly driven by cloud solutions. The financial application and human capital management market, or HCM, grew 29.8% and 25.9% respectively in the second half of the year. Although only offering financial application software in New Zealand, Xero overtook the market leader SAP in terms of market share. Xero held a 20.7% market share in 2014, just ahead of SAP's 19.4%. Melanie Dice, an IDC associate analyst covering the Australasian software market, says the local ERP market has been widely disrupted by Xero, which is driving most of the growth in the local ERP market. Although Xero only offered financial applications in New Zealand so far, it managed to sneak up to the top of the New Zealand ERP market. It'll be interesting to watch what happens this year as Xero starts offering payroll applications and inventory functionalities in New Zealand. To our current account, New Zealand posted a larger than expected current account surplus in the first quarter as spending by tourists widened the services balance and the country benefited from lower oil prices. According to Stats New Zealand, the current account surplus was $662 million in the 3 months ended March 31st. The annual deficit was $8.6 billion, or 3.6% of GDP, the highest in 2 years. According to a Reuters survey, economists expected a quarterly surplus of $240 million for an annual deficit of $9.01 billion, or 3.8% of GDP. Short-term visitors to New Zealand rose to almost 292,000 in March, a record for that month, and rounding out a 12-month period in which tourists rose to a record 2.95 million. Visitors were lured to New Zealand in the first quarter by the Cricket World Cup and Chinese New Year, and their spending helped drive up the services balance to a $2.2 billion surplus from $1.7 in the same quarter last year. Meanwhile, the actual balance on goods was a surplus of $834 million in the quarter, down from $2.4 billion a year earlier when dairy prices were near their peak. Exports were $12.4 billion compared with $13.7 billion in the first quarter of 2014. While imports rose to $11.6 billion from $11.3. The primary income balance, which measures returns to foreign owners of businesses in New Zealand and offshore earnings from New Zealand-owned companies, narrowed to about $2.3 billion, the smallest since the third quarter of 2013. Foreign companies paid fewer dividends to their overseas shareholders, and New Zealand-owned companies earned higher profit overseas, according to the government statistician. New Zealand's net foreign liabilities fell to 64.2% of GDP, or $153.5 billion, from 65% of GDP, or $154.6 3 months earlier. That was the lowest ratio since 2001.
Join NBR's Intelligent Business Network today. www.nbr.co.nz/subscribe. NBR.
This is NBR Radio on Wednesday, June 17th. I'm Owen Poland. The annual measure of world peace is out, and it shows we live in a much more violent place. In his editor's insight today, Neville Gibson reports on the Global Peace Index. And Neville, how much worse has world conflict become, and how can it be measured?
Well, the Global Peace Index is produced in London by an organisation called the Institute for Economics and Peace, and it uses 22 indicators to gauge domestic and international conflict, safety in society, and security and militarisation, and it measures 162 countries, doesn't leave many out. Sadly, it shows that for the past 7 years, the world has actually become more violent, and this ends a 60-year trend after World War II when we had a growing amount of peacefulness. Not surprisingly, this is due to the rise in terrorist activity, the number of conflicts being fought, and the increased number of refugees and displaced persons. These issues are seldom out of the headlines these days. The good news, though, is that New Zealand is still very high up in this index. We come in at 4th behind Iceland, Denmark and Austria, but that's slightly down from the previous year. We were 3rd in 2013 and second equal with Denmark in the 2012 index.
Now, the index is compiled by an Institute for Economics and Peace, so are there huge cost implications?
Yes, there are. The Institute, and this seems to be its main purpose, is that there's an economic impact of containing and dealing with the consequences of global violence, and last year it was estimated to be 9.8 trillion American dollars. This is equivalent to about 11.3% of global GDP, or twice the size of everything produced in Africa. It also compares with estimates for 2012 showing an increase in direct costs of $179 billion US. That's a 3.8% rise in costs. If you put it another way and divide these total costs by every person in the world, it comes out to more than $1,300 US. And the research shows that the increase in the global impact, or the economic impact of all this violence, is equivalent to 19% of what the world increased in its economy in the years 2012-13. So pretty big impact there.
Yeah, significant numbers, but I mean, just how accurate are these calculations and what do they say about future conflict?
Well, the Institute for Economics and Peace says it has new statistical modelling techniques, and these work with a 90% historic accuracy, and it even extrapolates these models out to pick the 10 countries most threatened by increased levels of unrest and violence over the next 2 years. These aren't the countries where the conflict's going on now, but these are the ones of future risk, and they include Zambia, Haiti, Argentina, Chad, Bosnia and Herzegovina, is it? Nearly got that one wrong. Nepal, Burundi, Georgia, Liberia, and the host for the Soccer World Cup, Qatar.
I thought that was a peace-loving nation, Neville. What are the dangers of going to Qatar?
Well, that World Cup is being held in 2022, so still a wee way away. But the real reason Qatar's a high risk, because it's on the index, it's the highest in terms of world peace, but the lowest in terms of democracy. As we know, it finances a number of Arab uprisings, although it's pulled back a little bit, and it's highly unpopular in many quarters in the region there. Al Jazeera is just one of those things where it's always revealing dictators and so on, and they don't like it. And while Qatar is a rich country, it also depends heavily on cheap imported labour. And of course, with the Soccer World Cup, there's been a lot of questions about even people using the term slave labour. So this doesn't mean there's going to be any conflict in Qatar, but it just has that biggest gap between peace and the lack of freedom.
Now, you mentioned that New Zealand had dropped a couple of places. What have been the major changes in this year's index?
Well, the biggest improvement's been in Georgia. There was a former Soviet republic. It's returned pretty much to normality following a conflict with Russia in 2011. I might add that is the subject of a film on at the moment called Tangerines. The Ivory Coast, or Côte d'Ivoire as it likes to be called, they were the second biggest of improvements. Remember, there was quite a coup d'etat and a lot of violence, but that's all dissipated. South Asia is the least peaceful area. That's India, Bangladesh, and those sort of places. But right at the bottom is Syria. It's displaced Afghanistan, while South Sudan has experienced the biggest drop down the index, and other major ones to fall down the index were Egypt, Ukraine, and the Central African Republic, a country about which you don't want to know anything from everything you read.
And that's today's Editor's Insight. My thanks to Neville Gibson.
NBR Radio with the Property Press. It's out now to show you around.
To the Australian OCR, the Reserve Bank of Australia provided no hints it intends to further drop interest rates, offering no explicit easing bias in the minutes of its June 2 meeting released yesterday. TD Securities Chief Asia Pacific macro strategist Annette Beecher says the RBA not offering any hints on what it would do with rates, not providing any forward guidance, was somewhat disappointing, as comments made by RBA Governor Glenn Stevens last week suggested further rate cuts were potentially on the table. He told the Economic Society of Australia, "We remain open to the possibility of further policy easing if that is on balance beneficial for sustainable growth." The minutes revealed the RBA wanted to leave rates unchanged while the impact of the recent interest rate cut in May was assessed. The RBA members noted it would take some time for the full effects of the cuts to be evident in the housing loan approvals and credit data. Westpac senior market strategist Imre Speiser says although the minutes don't explicitly contradict the easing bias which Mr Stevens seems to outline in his speech, he wouldn't go as far as saying Mr Stevens' comments are at odds with the information released in the minutes. ASB head of institutional FX sales Tim Callagher says it's likely Mr Stevens may have been trying to talk the currency down when he made his comments last week. He says Mr Stevens saying the RBA remains open to the possibility of further easing might have been an attempt to devalue the Aussie dollar without lowering rates. Mr Callagher says Australia has got some rate cuts still priced in, so it leaves it open to interpretation. The currency still needs to fall further and is likely to do so as well. He expects Aussie rates to be on hold for the rest of 2015, but if the RBA is going to cut, January next year would be the most likely time, as that's when the big LNG energy projects are to finish. Let's talk crowdfunding. Josh Daniel, co-founder of Snowball Effect, says the $2 million limit placed on those raising money through equity crowdfunding is a good place to start, but would probably be revised up over time. The $2 million cap in 1 year was raised today during a discussion on new platforms for raising capital at the Conference Financial Markets Law Conference in Auckland. The panel included Mr Daniel, Neil Roberts from peer-to-peer lender Harmony, and NZX Head of Funds Management Aaron Jenkins, who's been heavily involved in setting up the new NXT market, which launches tomorrow with the compliance listing of G3 Group. Equity crowdfunding and peer-to-peer lending were brought in less than a year ago through licensed platform providers and are regulated under the Financial Markets Conduct Act. Mr Daniel said the equity crowdfunding market was still getting on its feet and needed to consolidate before market regulators were likely to review the $2 million limit on the amount raised. He said it's a couple of years off. So far, around $10 million has been raised by mainly high-growth companies through equity crowdfunding, he said. The only one to date that has hit the $2 million cap is Vivo Wines in March on Snowball Effect, while on the same platform in February, drone company Aeronavix raised the previous highest amount, $1.5 million. Mr Daniels said the normal skew for investors was male, except for Vivo Wines, where women put more money in. One of the other licensed equity crowdfunding providers, PledgeMe, said the average amount raised from its 8 successful crowdfunding campaigns so far was $200,000. PledgeMe spokesman Jackson Wood said equity crowdfunding was still in its infancy and the $2 million cap was well above what companies had been aiming for to date on its platform for their 2-year growth strategies. He said, "We're not actively pushing for it to be raised, but we don't mind if it is." Mr Daniel told the conference there were 4 broad categories of Kiwi investors on its platform: professional people with some disposable income that find it an easy channel to make this sort of investment, retired people wanting to invest professionally, professional investors who can act as lead investors for others, and people associated with the company raising the money, such as customers and suppliers in that sector. Neil Roberts said Harmony has profiled the average retail investor and borrower on New Zealand's first peer-to-peer lender. The average borrower is a 43-year-old man on an above-average income whose loan is typically $15,000 and mainly used to either pay off credit card debt or for more home improvements. The average retail investor, which accounts for 20% of its marketplace, is a bit younger than the average borrower and is predominantly someone trying to save for a deposit on their first home. The average loan is $2,000. Mr Jenkins said the NXT is expected to attract more sophisticated investors than those on the main board who understand the higher risk attached to the fast-growing small to medium-sized companies likely to be raising money on the new market.
This is NBR Radio on Wednesday, June 17th. I'm Owen Poland, and I'm joined by NBR journalist Jenny Ruth, who's been delving into the potential benefits for Tiwai Point of potential changes in transmission charges by the Electricity Authority, Jenny.
Yes, well, an analyst at Forsyth Bar, Andrew Harvey-Green, is saying that the expected $50 million a year benefit to Tiwai Point is probably going to be a big enough carrot to keep the smelter operating. Under an agreement the smelter reached with Meridian in 2013, it has to say by July 1 if it wants to close the smelter by January 2017. Now, people had not expected that the Tiwai would close. That's because conditions in the aluminium market have improved considerably since 2013. But Mr. Harvey Green is saying the changes to transmission charges are a big carrot to make this pretty certain that it will stay open.
In fact, I suspect there's probably going to be some cynics out there who might suggest that these proposed changes by the Electricity Authority are purposefully designed to keep the smelter in New Zealand.
I don't think that would be fair.
No.
It's true. It's absolutely true. The smelter has a long history of being subsidised by New Zealand authorities. That 2013 deal that also involved the government giving it a one-off payment of $30 million just to stay open. And it pays way less for its electricity than anybody else. Mr. Harvey Green estimates it's probably paying about $50 a megawatt hour, and that compares with the ASX futures price of between $70 and $75. So, there's no doubts that Tiwai lives a privileged life in New Zealand. However, in this case, what the Electricity Authority's done is looked at where the actual costs lie and adopted a user pay basis for the proposed changes. And under the current regime, what Tiwai is actually paying for is upgrades in the Auckland area that benefit the population of Auckland, but are very difficult to see how Tiwai gets any benefit from that. And the reason why that happens is under the current system, everyone pays what they call a postage stamp rate. Everyone pays exactly the same no matter where they are on the grid. And obviously Tiwai is right at the bottom of the South Island and a long, long way from Auckland.
And that's NBR journalist Jenny Ruth.
NBR Radio. With Clooney Restaurant now offering Auckland's most exclusive private dining room. NBR Radio.
To the TPP. In the latest twist to the TPP saga in Washington, the House of Representatives has voted to extend the window for the crucial trade bill. Legislators voted 236 to 189 to extend through to July 30 its time frame for reconsidering the component of trade legislation that would extend a program of assistance to workers who are determined to have lost their jobs because of production shifts overseas or import competition. Previously, lawmakers had only until midnight to reconsider the legislation. Democrats defeated the trade assistance program last week to bring down connected legislation to provide President Obama with fast-track trade negotiating authority. Fast-track authority allows the president to submit trade deals to Congress for an up or down vote without amendments. The authority is seen as key to securing the Trans-Pacific Partnership Pact between the US and 11 other countries around the Pacific Ocean. The extended deadline will give the bill's Republican supporters more flexibility as they try to clear a path forward for the trade legislation. But there's no guarantee this will occur before the Congress goes into its summer recess trade in August. Republican House Speaker John Boehner says getting the trade bill finished is a large priority of mine. He said the President and I had a conversation yesterday. As a matter of fact, we had several conversations yesterday trying to find a way to move ahead. But Mr. Boehner says no decisions have been made yet on a path forward for the trade legislation. To US politics, property tycoon and reality TV star Donald Trump has finally put his money where his mouth is by declaring himself for the Republican presidential race. The flamboyant billionaire has shown an interest in 5 previous elections, but his announcement at Trump Tower in New York this morning is his first serious attempt. Bragging on Twitter he will make America great again, he has never held political office but says his negotiating skills, business acumen and wealth all count in his favour. He's come out fighting too by opposing Jeb Bush's support for so-called Common Core national education standards and a path to legal status for undocumented immigrants. Mr Bush announced his candidacy yesterday in an already crowded field of more than a dozen candidates. They include 4 sitting state governors, 4 senators and 3 former governors of major states. Mr Trump's high public profile from his business activities and as host of Celebrity Apprentice will immediately push him to the front line. As a novice, he can tap support from those who detest professional politicians, but his impact will mainly be from his ability to generate publicity. His launch event started with a medley of the Phantom of the Opera, the Rolling Stones and pop tunes before he offered a blistering critique of the Obama administration and of politicians in general. He promises to build a great wall on the Mexican border, which he says the Mexican government will finance, and present a tougher negotiating position with China. He says he will repeal President Obama's public health measures, get tough on Islamic State militants, and forbid Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons. Mr Trump says he can afford to finance his presidential campaign on his own. I'm really rich, he boasts, citing net worth of $8.7 billion, and has surprised observers by also having a fully fledged campaign organisation in the states where the first primaries are to be held. Unlike many of the other candidates, Mr Trump is already scoring between 3 and 5% support in recent national polls, enough to qualify for a Fox News debate on August 5. This will be restricted to the highest polling candidates and is likely to exclude contenders such as Senator Lindsey Graham, former Texas Governor Rick Perry, and businesswoman Carly Fiorina, who is the only woman in the contest. To the wool industry, Direct Capital and Accident Compensation Corporation have put no value on an option that could see Lempriere Australia owning 72.5% of the sole remaining wool scourer in New Zealand. Direct Capital's Gavin Lonergan told a Commerce Commission conference last week that the option shouldn't be an issue for the competition regulator. He said Direct Capital and ACC applied no value to that option at the time it was negotiated. I'm not sure why we're having this discussion, he said. The conference was on whether the Commission should allow Cavalier Wool Holdings and New Zealand Wool Services International, currently owned by Lempriere, to merge. Carpet maker Cavalier Corporation owns half of Cavalier Wool Holdings, and ACC and Direct Capital each own 25%. If the merger is approved, and the Commission has already issued a draft decision approving it, Cavalier would own 27.5% of the merged business, ACC and Direct Capital would own 27.5% between them, and Lempriere would own 45%. Rival carpet maker Godfrey Hirst, which owns the Feltex business, opposes the merger, and one of its grounds is that Lempriere's option creates uncertainty about the ultimate ownership of the merged entity. Giving evidence on behalf of Godfrey Hirst, Professor Graham Guthrie of Victoria University said the existence of the option means the 4 shareholders of the merged Scourer will have differing motivations. Professor Guthrie said what it means is the Commission can't assume the way it has done that these 4 shareholders want to maximise the value of the firm or maximise profits. The differing motivations of the shareholders means discussions that could lead to greater efficiency would be compromised. Lempriere would be motivated to pursue high-risk strategies to maximise its chances of gaining control of the company and would be protected from the failure of such strategies because it could choose not to exercise the option, the professor argued. Professor Guthrie said when you've got that conflict within the ownership group, put aside the fact that they will want different things that will change the decisions they will want to make. It just generates dissension within that group.
NBR. Need to hire? Try our online recruitment platform www.nbrtalent.co.nz.
I'm Grant Walker with Last Call. Here's what's trending on NBR Online. As MediaWorks begins another apparent review, they hire 3 names. The Productivity Commission wants more intervention in the Auckland housing market. Speaking of which, if you haven't got $500,000 you want a house in Auckland, bad luck. The Revenue Minister talks about the IRD technology rebuild and how it's really for us. And North Skog could be the big loser in transmission charges changes. To find out more, log on to nbr.co.nz or stay tuned. Those stories coming up next on NBR Radio. In market news, Airwork Holdings, the listed aviation service firm, has extended its contract with Toll Group to service and maintain the logistic company's Australian Express air freight business. The contract has been extended to mid-2022 and provides the air freight business with aircraft, crew, all maintenance, certification and insurance in what is known as a wet lease, the Auckland-based company said in a statement. The deal will see Airwork replace 2 of its 3 Boeing 737-300F planes used by Toll with larger 737-400F models next February. The contract extension with logistics provider Toll Group cements a strong base for its fixed-wing business unit and will increase operating efficiency, the aviation company said. It's been working with Toll for the past 8 years. The company's been focused on refining its fixed-wing service, reducing unscheduled and charter flying hours, cutting down on costs and expanding its dry lease fleet and customer base to widen margins. In February, Airwork lifted first-half profit 19% to $7.9 million, beating its prospectus guidance of $5.9 million. The company raised its earnings guidance to about $15.3 million for the year ending June 30 from a previous forecast of $14.5 million, which reflected the impact of the revision of Boeing 737 aircraft residual values. Airwork shares last traded at $3.09 and have fallen 1.1% since the start of the year. Let's talk Tiwai. Forsyth Bar analyst Andrew Harvey-Green says likely changes to transmission charges are a huge carrot to encourage the owners of the Tiwai Point aluminium smelter to keep it open. The smelter's owners are expected to make an announcement on Tiwai's future on July 1, and under an agreement with its electricity supplier, Meridian Energy, could opt to close the plant as early as January 2017. Rio Tinto subsidiary Pacific Aluminium owns 80% of the smelter's owner, New Zealand Aluminium, with Japan's Sumitomo Chemical holding the other 20%. Yesterday, the Electricity Authority published proposed changes to the way electricity transmission costs are allocated, which could deliver a $50 million a year windfall to the smelter. Mr. Harvey-Green says if it ends up being $50 million a year, that goes quite a long way toward making the smelter profitable. He says, in our view, NZAS is now very unlikely to announce it will terminate its electricity supply contract. The option value of a better transmission pricing deal is material and too great to ignore. The economic viability of the smelter has improved considerably since August 2013, when NZAS struck its deal with Meridian, sweetened by a one-off $30 million subsidy from the government. In March, Rio Tinto confirmed that the smelter was again running profitably, reinforcing expectations Tiwai will continue operating. Mr. Harvey-Green says 2014 wasn't too bad a year for aluminium, but prices have been falling over the last few months, as has the product premium the smelter gets. That has slightly increased the risk of the smelter closing, but the odds are still on it remaining open. The Electricity Authority's proposed changes are aimed at sending better price signals than the current regime. It says the current system is sending the wrong signals, leading to perverse behaviour by participants in the electricity industry. The authority's conclusion that the smelter is paying too much in transmission charges backs up complaints from NZAS management in April that the smelter's transmission costs were 10 times those of its competitors.
This is NBR Radio on Wednesday, June 17th. I'm Owen Poland. The management of New Zealand's two largest crowdfunding equity companies, Snowball and Pledge Me, say they're open to cooperating on a secondary market. With more on that story, I'm joined by NBR technical editor Chris Keel. And Chris, is it true that you actually brokered this idea between the two companies?
Well, NBR did a little bit of matchmaking, you could say. We ran a story last week on how Snowball is going to create a secondary market. At the moment, with the new crowdfunding legislation, you can, through Snowball or Pledge Me or one of the smaller competitors, you can crowdfund equity or raise sell shares on a crowdfunded basis. But after the initial raise, there's no way for the people who bought those shares to buy and sell them. So Snowball was looking at doing a secondary market, and NBR happened to know that Pledge Me had its own separate plans to do a secondary market. So I put the two ideas to the bosses of Snowball and Pledge Me, and now they are open to possibly doing a shared platform, which Snowball was keen to run itself, and Pledge Me's boss had no particular issue with that, so that could happen in a couple of months.
Yeah, the benefits, are pretty obvious, as you say. It creates a platform for people to trade their crowdfunding shares. What other benefits or opportunities are there beyond that?
I think it's just going to help get more people into the crowdfunding market. It's already there's been a lot more action than some people thought. Snowball, or companies that have listed on Snowball, have raised around $6 million, and on Pledge Me about $1.6 million, and they both seem to have a pretty good pipeline. Some people have even talked about a crowdfunded equity bubble, the bubble being very much the word of the year. But a lot of the companies like Yeasty Boys, the boutique brewer, they did a successful crowd-funded equity issue through Pledge Me, and one of the bosses there, Stu McKinley, was telling me he's looking possibly to raise some more money, and if there's a secondary market and that's generating interest in Pledge Me or the other crowd-funded equity platforms, I think it's going to lead companies like Yeasty Boys to gravitate back to them and go back to the well rather than alternatives like the stock exchange's new Next market.
I note one of the NBR contributors has written on the website raising questions about how this might proceed practically and whether it might require an FMA exemption, possibly because of the lack of information and regulation in that market.
Yeah,
so there'd be a few hurdles to jump, I guess.
Yeah, there's different ways to do it. Snowball reckons they can put it into place without having to go back to the FMA for more approval, though the FMA's already been quite open to authorising the crowd-funded equity platform. So I'd be reasonably optimistic they would approve a secondary market if that's required.
Yeah. There's a whole other bunch of crowd-funded companies out there. There's more than just Snowball and Pledge Me. In terms of scale, could there be potential issues about, who dominates this? I mean, who's the elephant in the room, and could there be some horse trading, do you think, before it happens?
Yeah, Snowball is easily the largest. The Equitise, which is one of the smaller ones, is coming in out of Australia, so it's got a bit of scale there. There's half a dozen approved by the FMA now, so I think it'll be like any new market. You could see some consolidation. In our comments section, we have had one reader raise the question of what the Shareholders Association would think about a secondary market, and they've hypothesised that they might not like it because just by their nature, these crowd-funded equity platforms and the companies that list on them, they don't release as much information as you get through the NZX about a company, which is one of the reasons it's a cheaper platform. So we have put that question to the Shareholders Association, and I'm just waiting to hear back from John Hawkins on that one. So check out the article later today, and we should have a response from him there.
And that's NBR's technology editor, Chris Keel.
NBR Radio. Free to air online. NBR, the meeting place of intelligent business.
Let's talk inland revenue. Revenue Minister Todd McClay says too much emphasis is going on the information technology aspect of the IRD's Business Transformation Project. Appearing before Parliament's Finance and Expenditure Select Committee today, Mr McClay told MPs the whole point of the project is to cut compliance costs for businesses and other taxpayers. Mr McClay told the committee the cost of complying with current tax rules is on average $10,000 a year. He told the committee that could be worth a couple of $1 billion in costs, and if we can find a way of halving that, that's nearly 0.5% of annual GDP. It would also mean firms will have more time to develop businesses and therefore have a productivity bonus. He says people will be able to think less about tax and more about their businesses. The project, which is estimated as likely to cost between $1.3 to $1.8 billion by the time it's completed in 8 to 10 years' time, replaces the existing IRD First computer mainframe, which was built in the early 1990s. Mr McClay told MPs that if the project were just about replacing old technology, it would be a lot cheaper than what the government will probably end up spending, although he says the official $1.3 to $1.8 billion estimate is probably too high. Only about a third of the cost of the project will be spent on technology, he said. Much of it will be about enabling real-time tax payments and rebates, as well as enabling more simple tax returns to be carried out on technology such as smartphones. The existing system is costing more each year to run, he says. At present, it costs roughly $120 million a year to maintain, and officials recently advised him next year it will cost a figure closer to $160 million. The government has spent slightly less than $100 million so far on the new project, he says. Last week, Inland Revenue announced the lead designer and contractor for the Business Transformation Project was US-based Fast International. However, Mr McClay stressed today that half the spending on the project so far has gone to New Zealand firms. In People News, Hong Kong-based Cathay Pacific Airways has reverted to having a local run its New Zealand and Pacific Islands operation. Sales and marketing manager Mark Pitahi will succeed Honolulu-born and Hong Kong-educated Brian Soy, who's been appointed country manager for Switzerland. In July, Mr Pitahi will have worked 25 years working in Cathay Pacific's Auckland office, which until 2011 was run by David Figgins, a 37-year-old veteran at Cathay. Mr Pitahi was educated at Kelston Boys High at West Auckland and joined the travel industry as a cadet with Atlantic and Pacific Travel. He'll take up his new role on July 20. Cathay Pacific first started operating services to New Zealand in 1983 in a tripartite venture with Air New Guinea and Air New Zealand. It now operates 2 to 3 daily flights between Auckland and Hong Kong, depending on the season, in a code share with Air New Zealand. Mr Soy's move to Switzerland follows the introduction of daily flights from Hong Kong to Zurich at the end of March this year. In medical news, Code Biotech, a cancer therapy company founded by Auckland University of Technology Professor Stephen Henry, has signed a licensing agreement with a UK company that will be worth up to £21 million. Aguelimune, a biopharmaceutical company focused on the development of a pipeline of innovative immunotherapies for the personalised treatment of cancer, has licensed Code Biotech's Function Spacer Lipid, or FSL, cell surface membrane modification technology. The proprietary technology will be incorporated by Aguelimune into its novel cancer immunotherapy molecules. Immunotherapies are designed to elicit or amplify an immune response. Code is 6.03% owned by AUT. The largest private investor is NBR Rich Lister Sir David Levine, who holds a 15.08% stake via a holding company, followed by Professor Henry, who also serves as chief executive, with a 14.65% stake. Under the terms of the agreement, Code may receive up to £21 million in development and sales milestones, plus royalties on net sales. Aguelimune has exclusive rights to the use of the technology in the field of intratumoral injection for cancer treatment, and specifically relating to the clinical candidate molecule AG1134. Code technology has been extensively validated by Aguelimune before in licensing and has been shown to be effective for treatment of both primary and secondary tumours in animals. Aguelimune injects synthetic animal antigen mimetics, which incorporate the FSL constructs into primary tumours. As the immune system naturally rejects animal tissue, it attacks the modified tumour. In this process of destroying the tumour, the body's immune system is educated to recognise the patient's own tumour antigens and so destroy unmodified primary and secondary tumours. Aguelimune Director Graham Griffiths says, "We believe this technology has great value in immunotherapy, and we're very pleased to be collaborating with a world leader in the development of synthetic glycolipids." This licensing agreement also represents a significant step forward in Aguelimune's progress toward the development of pioneering targeted cancer vaccines and immunotherapies for the benefit of patients. Giles Whalen, Professor of Surgery at University of Massachusetts, where Aguelimune's approaches were first developed, says this development builds on the mechanism of action research we've undertaken on this first in-class therapeutic modality, opens the door to promising combination approaches of immune priming with checkpoint blockade and other immune-modulating therapies, and may bring new promise for the treatment of patients.
NBR Radio with the Property Press. It's out now to show you around.
This is NBR Radio on Wednesday, June 17th. I'm Owen Poland, and I'm joined by Rob Hosking. And Rob, in question time in Parliament yesterday, Labor seemed to be scoring a few punches over Auckland's housing issues.
Yeah, it was quite interesting to watch yesterday, as well as having the odd entertaining moment, because it did seem as if, firstly, there was a bit more of a coherent approach from Labor, and coherence in the Labor Party are not things that one has tended to associate with each other in the past year or two. The other thing is that they were making some palpable hits on Mick Smith's rather erratic performance the last couple of weeks over sale of surplus land, or surplus Crown land in Auckland, use of it for housing, because it turns out that some of it isn't available for housing after all, and a few other things were or were not promised to the local iwi, and all that's going to court now, of course. So, and it does seem rather odd that wasn't sorted out in advance. In fact, odd is probably a polite way of putting it. So, there was, I suppose, there was an element of fish in a barrel, but it was very, very, very good politics, very effective politics, because this is going to hold up the government's program in this area, firstly, and secondly, it's it does look as if proper process, or sensible process anyway, hasn't been followed.
Yeah, do you think, the government's been blindsided a bit by this challenge by iwi?
Yeah, and if they were blindsided, it's extraordinary because whenever the Crown decides to divest itself of pretty much anything, there's an immediate court challenge. That's been happening since the State-Owned Enterprises Act was passed in 1986. So this has been going on for a long time, 30 years close to it. And it's quite extraordinary that this wasn't, seen coming.
Also, could you read into this that maybe there's something going on in the relationship between the government and Maori?
Well, there's always something going on in the relationship between government and Maori.
True.
There's obviously there's issues with keeping the support partner of the Maori Party on board, and there are, I suppose, those. But even aside from that, there's just something of a legal question here that inevitably this was going to happen, and it's quite clear that talks were going on because well before this, because we know that according to one version anyway, some of the land in question was being talked about being used by Ngāti Whatua over a year ago. So this hasn't come out of a clear blue sky. Talks have been going on even aside from the housing thing for quite some time. So this does look like either left hand didn't know what right hand was doing, or right hand had its fingers crossed and hoped a few fairly inevitable things weren't going to happen.
And of course, Nick Smith's copping all the flack. How safe is his position as housing minister?
Well, I think we'll see how this rides out. I think he's safe for now. This is not a resignable offence, despite some of the more excitable stuff that's gone on. He doesn't look on top of his job in this area. The question is whether this will become an ongoing issue or whether it turns into another 72-hour wonder. I would say it's probably going to run for a wee bit yet.
Okay, my thanks to Rob Hosking.
NBR Radio with Baileys, New Zealand's leading commercial real estate company.
In regional politics, Fran Wild won't be vacating the chairwoman spot at Wellington Regional Council just yet. Councillor Prue Lamison says councillors have been informed a vote can't be taken on a new candidate for the chair for another 21 days, according to the council rules. She says there's nothing I'd like more than to put it to the vote now. Ironically, Ms Lamison says a council meeting yesterday was one of the most cordial she has attended. Fran Wild was rolled as chairman late last week after the Local Government Commission rejected a Wellington super city idea she had been promoting, which involved merging a group of councils. What sealed Ms Wild's fate was the emergence of a backup plan she had revealed to just a few people. The secondary plan recommended transferring roading, water and economic development functions from local councils to the regional council. This prompted a majority of regional councillors to sign a letter demanding Ms Wild's resignation. Ms Lamison says the backup plan is even more politically aggressive than the merger proposal and risked a backlash from the local councils, which had already mooted another alternative plan where the regional council would be subsumed into a new structure of 3 district councils. Ms Lamison says relations need to be repaired. Ms Lamison says there were other areas of concern about regional council direction. One of them is the council's promotion of and funding of irrigation schemes in the Wairarapa. Ms Lamison says she's never been asked to vote on it and is distrustful of the way the council appears to have been sucked into the process. To the wool industry, Direct Capital and Accident Compensation Corporation have put no value on an option that could see Lempriere Australia owning 72.5% of the sole remaining wool scourer in New Zealand. Direct Capital's Gavin Lonergan told a Commerce Commission conference last week that the option shouldn't be an issue for the competition regulator. He said Direct Capital and ACC applied no value to that option at the time it was negotiated. I'm not sure why we're having this discussion, he said. The conference was on whether the Commission should allow Cavalier Wool Holdings and New Zealand Wool Services International, currently owned by Lempriere, to merge. Carpet maker Cavalier Corporation owns half of Cavalier Wool Holdings, and ACC and Direct Capital each own 25%. If the merger is approved and the Commission has already issued a draft decision approving it, Cavalier would own 27.5% of the merged business, ACC and Direct Capital would own 27.5% between them, and Lempriere would own 45%. Rival carpet maker Godfrey Hirst, which owns the Feltex business, opposes the merger, and one of its grounds is that Lempriere's option creates uncertainty about the ultimate ownership of the merged entity. Giving evidence on behalf of Godfrey Hirst, Professor Graham Guthrie of Victoria University said the existence of the option means the four shareholders of the merged Scour will have differing motivations. Professor Guthrie said what it means is the Commission can't assume the way it has done that these four shareholders want to maximise the value of the firm or maximise profits. The differing motivations of the shareholders means discussions that could lead to greater efficiency would be compromised. Lempriere would be motivated to pursue high-risk strategies to maximise its chances of gaining control of the company and would be protected from the failure of such strategies because it could choose not to exercise the option, the professor argued. Professor Guthrie said when you've got that conflict within the ownership group, put aside the fact that they will want different things that will change the decisions they will want to make. It just generates dissension within that group. To the kiwi fruit industry, Zespri has incurred costs of $4.9 million since the Serious Fraud Office began investigating it. The kiwi fruit marketer has also provisioned a further $1.4 million for the investigation during this financial year. In addition, Chief Executive Lane Jager is refusing to confirm he had no knowledge of the under-declaration of kiwi fruit to Chinese customs when the offences were committed by Zespri's wholly owned subsidiary and a former importer. The SFO launched its investigation into the statutory monopsony in 2013. Although the SFO has not publicly communicated the focus of its investigation, it's understood a key area relates to the under-declaration of customs duties in Shanghai from 2008 to 2010. Zespri has previously admitted running a double invoicing system for kiwi fruit shipments to China, a scheme the company says it considered legal. More worryingly for the Mount Maunganui-based company, NBR has seen internal Zespri documents that contradict the company's testimony to a Shanghai court last year. Last year, Zespri hired forensic investigations firm BT Vali to review documents and interview staff for the SFO investigation probe. Zespri has also engaged the services of John Billington QC to work with Zespri lawyers Buddle Finlay, while Zespri's former auditor PwC is collecting and providing information required by the SFO. According to Zespri Senior Communications Advisor Rachel Lynch, Zespri continues to fully cooperate with the investigation, which has requested 100 boxes of hard copy documents, several terabytes of information, and 3.5 million historical emails from Zespri. In May last year, speaking about Zespri's then $3 million SFO investigation bill, Mr. Jager told media there's an investment associated with background legal work related to the investigation.
You're listening to NBR Radio. Upgrade to My NBR Radio with a smartphone-only subscription to NBR Online today for free and receive unlimited access to NBR Online on your smartphone until August 31st. Visit www.nbr.co.nz/free.
This is NBR Radio on Wednesday, June 17th. I'm Owen Poland, and welcome to our weekly edition of Foreign Affairs Scope with Nathan Smith. And Nathan, your focus is predominantly this week on the Middle East.
Yeah, we'll jump straight into there again. Yemen, haven't touched on that for a few weeks, but Saudi airstrikes continue against the Houthi rebels coming from the south of the pro-ex government there. They have been stymied, however, and appear to have lost the initiative, and the Hadi government, essentially the regime, is now pushing back and striking at some central towns. Saudi airstrikes have caused a lot of damage to the Houthi rebels in the north as they advance south. So they have actually been effective, but they are starting to have a disproportionate amount of collateral damage, especially as they've attacked some World Heritage sites in the Ardennes as well, which was not good. But further west, is some attacks in Egypt. Some of them have been foiled, others have been relatively successful, but they're attacking, we don't know who they are. They may be an ISIS affiliate branch in the Sinai Peninsula that are extending their reach into Egypt proper, but they're attacking places like Luxor and Giza, especially near the pyramids.
So popular tourist destinations.
That's right. Egypt relies heavily on its tourism. Since 2010, it's actually lost half its revenue from about 12 billion to about 6, and only gained about another billion last year. So it's struggling a lot. So anything like this can really affect the state. So these aren't just killing people; these are actually hurting a lot of what Egypt's doing.
So how much effect in the big picture terms are these incursions having? Are they getting deeper and deeper?
Yeah, well, they're smarter and smarter. If it is the ISIS-affiliated group from the Sinai, then that's showing that they have the will to do this against the Egyptian state and the ability to do this against the Egyptian state, both of which are not good for the military-dominated government there. The military have been working against Sinai-based groups quite heavily in the past couple of months, but clearly they're trying to branch out to maybe lash out with their final death throes, or maybe this is an evolution of their particular capabilities. We're not sure yet, but it does not bode well for the Egyptian state.
On the other hand, not such good news for Al-Qaeda.
No, and Al-Qaeda, they're down, but they're not out. But the deaths of Nasser al-Wayashi in Yemen, who was the Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula leader. He was also second in command of Al-Qaeda as well. He used to be the lieutenant of Osama bin Laden, essentially the secretary, and they trained together and fought together in Afghanistan. And he was considered one of the most dangerous individuals in regards to that movement, and he based himself in Yemen, which sort of harks back to what I was talking about before. The chaos in that country is actually opening up a lot of room to move for the Al-Qaeda group in that particular country. But he appears to have made a mistake by coming into some built-up areas, and US drones struck him, and the death of that particular person was confirmed this morning by the group. He represents what's known as an exceptional individual when it comes to terrorism. There are a bunch of unexceptionals who generally end up being suicide bombers and not so much to worry about. But this particular leader was very close to the Al-Qaeda core and had built Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula to probably the most dangerous Al-Qaeda franchise group in the world. So removing him from the battlefield was a good movement. And
the US might have also scored another hit.
That's right. So further north in Libya, Mokhtar Belmokhtar, who was, if you might remember, the orchestrator of the In Amenas assault in Algeria in 2013 that killed a whole bunch of miners and gas workers there. He's also had a number of times been rumoured to be dead, so we'll have to wait for confirmation from the group. But again, he was potentially killed inside a built-up area in Libya, which means a number of things. Two of the most important is clearly the US have built up their intelligence capabilities from almost nothing a couple of years ago to the ability to nab someone like this. So clearly they've pushed quite heavily on that front. Secondly, moving into Libya against where there's quite a lot of chaotic Islamic movements, especially with ISIS and Al-Qaeda and a whole bunch of other ones in there, means that there may be some turf grounds being opened up in there, which means there could be some internecine warfare between the groups, which should be useful for the overall effort. But it doesn't put Libya into a good place at all.
You're listening to Foreign Affairs Scope with Nathan Smith. Now moving further north in Europe up to Ukraine and Russia, and the US seem to be positioning themselves for something.
Yes.
Tell me more.
The US are planning, although Defence Secretary Ash Carter hasn't confirmed that he will, but they've been talking about it for a while, positioning heavy weapons in East European countries. So moving from almost a line from the Baltic countries down to Romania. Essentially saying to those allies in the region, we are here for you. But the message isn't necessarily for the East Europeans. The message is directly for Putin. Here and no further. This is the cordon. This is where we're saying you can do what you want in the stalemate, essentially, of Ukraine, but try anything else, and we will see just how how big NATO actually is here. But it points to the US as having the initiative in this particular conflict. They are able to extend from their home country all the way into Europe and pre-position heavy weapons and brigade-size combat troops, so that's 3,000 to 5,000 troops along these paths, and yet Russia can't really extend past its own borders. So Russia is still the weaker player here, and this is very much a US-Russia story, as we can see with the pre-positioning of these troops. How has Putin responded? Putin has responded rhetorically, but also threatened to pre-position medium-range ballistic missiles in the exclave of Kaliningrad, which is just below the Baltic countries. It's Russian territory, but that would be right inside, essentially, Central Europe. We're unsure if he will actually do that, because that would be a significant tension, but he's just showing that maybe they have some movements of their own to make, but that would appear at this point to be rhetorical, although he has increased overflights of Russian bombers around Europe, closer to Britain over the past couple of months. He's really, I think, showing very quickly now the limits to his military capability in Eastern Europe.
Finally, Nathan, you've got an update on that failed vote at the weekend to fast-track the Trans-Pacific Partnership. That's right. The US House of Representatives have voted to extend the deadline for the Trade Promotional Authority, which is the fast track, to July 30. It sort of rings a bit true as to what this is. We expected them to be talking about this and realigning the interests and the power groupings, as I talked about yesterday, behind the scenes. What we heard through the media probably isn't the full story, and certainly they want to build up a crisis feeling. But the extension runs along those lines. The TPA and the TPP are bigger than a lot of these personalities and personal interests. And Speaker of the House has been talking to Obama quite a lot over the past couple of days, he says himself, which indicates that there are still some horse trading to be done. But other countries are starting to look at the US being lax here and asking, well, are they really serious about their Asia pivot, as they talked about? Are they really serious about coming and joining us with the international trade? Singapore, for instance, recently spoke out and said, we don't see you being serious here, so we'd love to see you past TPA. So I think there's some frustration around the Pacific Rim, but essentially this is still an American story. What they do matters, and it appears that they are, again, horse trading and realigning power interests behind and in the corridors. But it's nonetheless been dragging on for quite a while now. Will another 6 weeks really make any difference? Well, it's as Grosser said, New Zealand Trade Minister Grosser said the other day, this is really do or die. They're getting too close to the presidential election race, and during that time, no one will have any time for any trade deals. So getting this done within the next month is fairly crucial. And that's this week's edition of Foreign Affairs Scope. My thanks to Nathan Smith.
NBR. Need to hire? Try our online recruitment platform, www.nbrtalent.co.nz.
In Tally News, the BBC says radio and television personality Chris Evans will replace Jeremy Clarkson as lead Top Gear presenter. The broadcaster says the next series of the motoring show will feature an all-new lineup, meaning current co-host Richard Hammond and James May would not be involved. The pair earlier said they were a package deal with Mr Clarkson. Mr Evans, described as cheeky by the BBC, is a household name in the UK, if little known overseas. He's owned a number of Ferraris and Porsches and was fined in 2001 after admitting to driving 105 miles an hour. His involvement in a number of fender benders saw the Daily Mirror nickname him Crash Evans. The final episode of Top Gear featuring the current hosts will screen on June the 28th, according to the BBC. It was filmed before Mr Clarkson was suspended in March for punching a producer during a catering dispute. The other two new presenters have yet to be named. In January, local rights for Top Gear shifted from Sky TV to MediaWorks. Top Gear generated around £145 million revenue for the BBC's commercial arm, BBC Worldwide, last year, making it easily the broadcaster's most lucrative show. Let's go to Paris. The first 2 days of the Paris Air Show have already clocked up orders for 400 new aircraft worth tens of billions of dollars. The lion's share has gone to Airbus and Boeing, with the sales mainly comprising single-aisle jets to meet insatiable demand for fuel-efficient aircraft amid a worldwide boom in air travel. In the single biggest deal, leasing company AerCap Holdings ordered 100 Boeing 737 MAX jets valued at $10.7 billion US. Airbus continues to lure customers with its A320 family of jets. Korean Air signed a memorandum of understanding for 50 A321 jets worth more than $6 billion US at list prices. Garuda Indonesia was Boeing's biggest single airline customer, signing up for 30 787-9 Dreamliners and 30 737 MAX aircraft. Garuda has also signed up for 30 of Airbus's new double-aisled A350 jets. Saudi Arabian Airlines has become the first customer for Airbus's revamped A330 regional long-distance plane. The wide-body plane can carry as many as 400 passengers on flights of up to 3,000 nautical miles, allowing airlines to transport more passengers on short routes than smaller single-aisle planes. Among other manufacturers, Brazil's Embraer notched up orders for more than 100 of its regional jets, while Canada's Bombardier unveiled the first of its C-Series that will provide the first real competition in years for the smallest Boeing and Airbus commercial passenger models. To Auckland housing. Aucklanders trying to get into the housing market with less than $500,000 to spend are being closed out. For the first time, Trade Me Properties Price Index shows there are no longer any property types or sizes with an average asking price of less than $500,000. Trade Me Property head Nigel Jeffries says there are no signs of the Auckland property market slowing down. He says buyers have recently been looking at apartments and units as a way of getting on the property ladder, but anyone hoping to find a property investment under $500,000 is going to find it increasingly difficult. Mr. Jeffrey says attempts to dampen the housing market are yet to have an effect. Auckland's average asking prices, he says, have ticked up $6,850 since April. Asking prices are now just shy of $750,000 at $747,450, climbing more than $100,000 in the past 12 months. He says the average asking price for a one- or two-bedroom home in Auckland is now higher than the average asking price for all homes across the country. At $565,600, the asking prices for these smaller homes are up 17.3% over the past year and have hit a new record high. While Auckland is setting new prices, the national average asking price fell month on month by 0.8% to $535,250. Over the past year, apartments, the off-malign cousin of the Auckland housing market, have risen by $114,050 to a record high, $504,500. 5 years ago, the average asking price for an Auckland apartment was $316,000. Units have seen a similar appreciation in price expectation, and average asking prices edged past $500,000 in May. 5 years ago, the asking price was $318,000. Last month, that had reached $509,250, up 60%. Meanwhile, New Zealand Mortgages and Securities Director James Callow says if he were a first homeowner, he would be rushing out and borrowing as interest rates below 5% across the board are inevitable. Many banks have dropped their interest rates since last week's cut in the official cash rate to 3.5%. Mr. Callow says there will probably be another cut to the wholesale rates in the coming months, which will mean interest rates below 5% for many homeowners. What points to a drop is the Reserve Bank's increasing concern about the impact of falling export commodity prices, which have been more pronounced than expected. Dairy prices fell 1.3% overnight to the lowest level since 2009. Mr. Callow says with the LVR and tax changes targeting investors from October 1 and a possible drop in foreigners buying New Zealand property, summer could be a good time to buy. He says for homeowners, locking in a cheaper mortgage interest rate is often better on the back pocket longer term than trying to negotiate a slightly lower house price.
NBR Radio. Free to air online with business news you can use.